Ms Nandy, who is our new culture secretary, has declared them to be officially over. She used her first speech as part of the new government to make that declaration. And here's what she said. She said, "For too long, for too many people, the story we tell ourselves about ourselves as a nation has not reflected them, their community, or their lives. This is how polarisation, division, and isolation thrives. In recent years, we've found multiple ways to divide ourselves from one another and lost that sense of a self-confident, outward-looking country which values its own people in every part of the UK." She went on to say, "Changing that is a mission of this department. The era of culture wars is over." Now, according to research which was conducted by King's College London, 44% of people think that the culture wars are a serious problem for UK society and politics. So the questions that I want to ask you this hour is, first of all, how much damage have they done? Did they do? And secondly, how do we fix that damage? Is simply disengaging from the so-called culture wars going to be enough here? Or do we need to actively do some work in the other direction? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you have just an immediate instinctive answer to those questions. Now, some of you might be listening to this and thinking, what actually are the culture wars? This is something that I've heard spoken of again and again, but I've never really understood what it means. The official definition on Wikipedia is hot button politics about values and ideology realised with intentionally adversarial social narratives meant to provoke political polarisation. So that's quite a kind of difficult to understand definition, I think. I don't think they needed to make it as difficult as that. I would define it as a story or a narrative repeated by politicians and their friends in the media with the aim of deliberately dividing people. Either because people who are angry are easier to manipulate, or because it distracts people from the broader economic and social failings of their party. And usually a combination of both. That's what I think the culture wars are. It's a stupid, made-up lie that is told about a particular group of usually vulnerable people to get people arguing about things that don't matter. Now, in the UK, the Wikipedia article specifically traces the culture wars back to the Brexit referendum and said that they were at their most vicious when concerning discussions about Black Lives Matter, Britain's colonial history, and trans rights. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that any of those three things is unimportant whatsoever. What I'm saying is the important discussions that people were trying to have about those three things were hijacked by lies and nonsense to try and get us arguing about the fluff, whilst the government continued to be incompetent, to mess up the economy, to indulge in corruption and all of the other stuff that we know that they did. And I had a sort of minor disagreement with my producer about this. Not a big one. We don't fall out because he's wonderful. But when I first suggested that we should do this for this hour, my producer said to me, most people don't care about the culture wars. And I have two problems with that as a statement. My first is I hear a lot of people saying I don't care about these issues. Oh, it's stupid. You know, all of this stuff about, whether we're putting up a plaque on a building to say that this was owned by a former slave trader. I don't care about that kind of stuff. They're fed up of hearing about it. But that doesn't stop them from repeating it. There's so many fabricated culture war talking points that I have heard repeated, often in small talk, by people who are not angry, and they may not think that they're taking an active interest, but they do absorb what they read and hear. And often what they read and hear is deliberate disinformation. So that's my first problem with the whole, people don't care. My second problem with it is there are clearly enough people who do care about the culture wars and have taken it seriously. And that has real life consequences because there was a 19% increase in racially motivated hate crime, according to the Home Office, between 2021 and 2022, which of course was when the Black Lives Matter discussions were having their resurgence. That pushed incidents of racially motivated hate crime above 100,000 annually for the first time in our country's history. In the last 5 years, there's been a 112% increase in hate crime relating to sexual orientation and 168% relating to gender identity, according to the Office for National Statistics. And that's before we even consider what Andrew Tate-ification has done in terms of sexual harassment and misogyny. So to say this isn't important or most people don't care, I think is indicative of a level of privilege, or at least insulation from this kind of real life danger that this rhetoric enables. And of course, people like Andrew Tate, you know, these professional hate mongers, they would exist without politicians. But when they are endorsed by politicians, as Tate was recently by a leader of one of our political parties, or when their points are dog whistled or repeated by politicians, it legitimizes them. Politicians have undoubtedly fueled the culture wars, even if they didn't invent them. And I had a little bit of a revelation, actually, on the train coming over here. That there's this kind of circular nature to what has gone on for the past 14 years, or let's say, actually, for the past 8 years. Let's date it back to the Brexit referendum. There's a circular nature to these culture war discussions because what happens is this. First of all, you have, let's call them right-wing politicians, right? There are other people who are guilty of this, but let's say, for the sake of argument, it's right-wing politicians who attack minoritized groups for political capital, to score political points, either for distraction or to make people angry and easy to manipulate. Those minoritized people, because what's being said about them is not true or is stigmatizing or misguiding in some way, those minoritized people and their allies who tend to fall more on the left or be more liberal or progressive in their thinking, they come in understandably angry at the way that they've been misrepresented and try and talk about what the truth is. The right wing then pivot and start accusing the left of constantly being angry and hysterical as though it's their natural state and that they didn't start the whole thing. And also of harping on about these issues that no one cares about. And that is a way of then re-attacking the minoritized group that they attacked in the first place by saying, oh, you're trying to impose your ideologies on us now. Stop going on about it. Really convenient way to get a double punch in from the same original lie. And so the cycle continues. That's how the culture war fuels itself. And a great example recently was Suella Braverman, who is trying to perpetuate the culture wars. She made a recent speech over in America, and much was made of her describing the Home Office as occupied territory because there were pride flags flying outside. But what has been less discussed is what she said afterwards. So she said she described her disgust at this is what she described as the mutilation of children in our hospitals. And she was speaking about trans youth, which is a regular culture wars talking point. But I can't emphasize this to you strongly enough. In the United Kingdom, you cannot access surgical gender-affirming healthcare if you are trans under the age of 18. So there literally are not children being, in Suella Braverman's words, mutilated in normal language, receiving gender-affirming healthcare that is surgical in hospitals in the UK. So that was a lie. That is what we call here in the real world a lie. And if I get angry that she's lying and deliberately misrepresenting a vulnerable group of people, and I point that lie out to you to try and combat it with truth, there's many of you, and it happens all the time, who will accuse me of being obsessed with trans issues and tell me that you're sick of hearing about it. And it's like, I didn't start it. I did not start this. I'm trying to correct a mistruth that has real life consequences. So how do we stop this cycle? Do we just disengage? Is it as simple as that? Or does something else need to happen to undo the damage that has been done by this rancid rhetoric that we have all been subjected to?